In the days leading up to 9/11, fighting in Afghanistan between the local groups and the Taliban resulted in thousands of refugees pouring down into the neighboring Peshawar in Pakistan. And they were squashed into tents and mud hovels in camps where there was intense heat and very poor sanitation. James and Roberta Woodbury were working in these camps with a group of Christians. And Woodbury describes what happened in the camps. He said conditions at one camp were harsher than at the others. So Roberta and some of the workers took school supplies to the students so they had more than just blank slates and chalk. Another group of 8 workers imported thousands of sandals for the children who ran around with bare feet on the rough, parched ground. But they went one step further. They washed the feet of each child. For a whole week, they washed every foot with antibacterial soap, and they anointed each foot with oil, and they silently prayed for the child. And then they gave each child new sandals, a quilt, a shawl, and a small bag of flour for every family. Sometime later, a teacher in one of the tents used for the refugee school asked her class this question: "Who are the best Muslims?" And a little girl raised her hand and replied, "The Kafirs." Now, the Kafirs is a pejorative term, means unbelievers. It means those who are not one of us. And after the teacher recovered from her shock, she asked the little girl, "Well, why?" And the little girl replied, "The Muslim fighters killed my father, but the Kafirs washed my feet." If we want to understand the meaning of this feast this weekend of Corpus Christi, the body and blood of Christ, we only need to hear this story. That group of Christians responded to the challenge of Jesus at the Last Supper: "Do this in memory of me." It didn't matter if they were Christian or Muslim, believers or unbelievers. They responded to the needs of their fellow human beings. We celebrate Eucharist daily. Many come weekly. We consume the bread and wine that is filled with God's presence. But there's one more step that we must go, one further step to meet out the challenge that we hear every time we celebrate Mass: "Do this in memory of me." And the challenge is that we must become bread and wine. We must become the real presence to nourish those who hunger around us, to quench the thirst of those who are thirsty around us, to wash the feet of those around us who are hurting and destitute, wherever they may be, whoever they may be. Do this in memory of me, which I will say very shortly in our Eucharistic prayer, is really Jesus' challenge to leadership. There's a very interesting book out on leadership written by Simon Sinek called "Leaders Eat Last." And Simon found himself amazed and even a bit humbled by the character of the men and women in our armed forces. And he wondered where this character came from. Initially, he kept arriving at the same assumption: well, these are just a special class of people. They're better than us. But then he was working in Afghanistan, and he had an experience that revised that premise. He explained, "Everything on our trip went wrong. We actually got stuck there because the base came under rocket attack when I was there. And it was through this experience where I learned what service really means. And he says, service means giving to others with no expectation of anything in return. He talks about fulfillment, calm, security, peace of mind, confidence. And he says all of this comes from a willingness to serve others. Because only when we decide to look after others do we find this calm, this security, this peace of mind. And he discovered that our servicemen and women who have a special role in defending our country, but they are not just in a class by themselves. He concludes that all of us can become good leaders if we serve others, that the rank of office is not what makes someone a leader. Leadership is the choice to serve others with or without any formal rank. Leaders are the ones who run headfirst into the unknown. They rush toward danger. They put their own interests aside to protect us or pull us into the future. Leaders would rather sacrifice what is theirs to save what is ours. And they would never sacrifice what is ours to save what is theirs. This is what it means to be a leader. As we gather every week or every day and celebrate the body and blood of Christ, we celebrate so much more than just our receiving this nourishing bread and this refreshing cup that's filled with God. We celebrate and we hear the challenge to be leaders, to leave here and go that one step further, to humble ourselves and to wash the feet of those around us who are in need, whoever they are and wherever they might be. We do not need to go to refugee camps. We do not need to be in the service. We are called wherever we find ourselves this day, in this time in our history. We just cannot come here just to have our own hunger taken care of, our own thirst quenched. We are challenged to do this in memory of me. And this is the challenge we hear every time the celebrant raises that cup up in the Eucharistic prayer. And this is the essence of what this celebration of the body and blood of Christ is all about.